بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 26 to 29. درس القرآن الحكيم, by thinker of the Quran, Allama Ghulam Ahmad Parwez. My dear friends, today is the 18th of August, 1968, and in our new series of Quranic lessons, we had reached up to the 25th verse of Surah Al-Baqarah in the previous session. There, I had explained that the Quran states, those who establish the system of rububiyyah granted by God will be given two paradises, a paradise in this world and a paradise in the life to come.
The Quranic symbolic description of paradise in relation to the needs of physical life. The details of the blessings of paradise are mentioned in numerous places throughout the Quran. When viewed collectively, it becomes clear that everything required for the comfort and adornment of human physical life is included in these descriptions. However, one important point must be kept in mind. The first audience of the Quran was the Arab nation. Therefore, the things that represented joy, prosperity, freshness, and abundance in their eyes were mentioned prominently. For example, cool, clear, sparkling springs of water, gardens, trees laden with fruits so accessible that they fall into everyone's lap, the meat of birds, couches spread along flowing streams, carpets, curtains of silk and brocade, vessels of silver and gold. These were universally considered luxuries of life, and for the early Arab audience, they represented the height of worldly comfort. But this does not mean that these exact items in their literal form are what will be given. The Quran clarified this in a single phrase, وَأُوتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا, 2:25. They will be given things similar to what they knew. Meaning, in every era, provisions will be given that resemble the comforts of that age, according to the needs and standards of each time. These are fundamentally symbols of comfort and beauty. Do not assume that they refer to fixed specific items. Whatever the demands of each age may be, the corresponding comforts and adornments will be provided. If, in that early era, the Quran had mentioned today's luxuries, for example, you will have refrigerators, they would not have understood what was being said. Thus, these descriptions relate to the comforts of this world, expressed in terms familiar to the first audience. I was explaining that the Quran states, living according to the divine law results in paradise in this world and paradise in the hereafter. These are the two paradises the Quran speaks of. Regarding the paradise of this world, the Quran itself has given details, naming various comforts and adornments, but it has also warned, do not assume that these exact items will always be given. It says, وَأُوتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا, meaning that in every era, provisions will be given that resemble the comforts appropriate to that age. No human being can understand the blessings of the world to come while living at the present level of consciousness. In any case, this present life is a physical life, and the Quran speaks of physical comforts within it. When these comforts are kept subordinate to divine values, the human self continues to grow, but these comforts still belong to this worldly life. Regarding the paradise of the life to come, a common objection is raised. Look at their paradise: water, fruits, couches, curtains, and even, according to their imagination, houris. They claim that exactly these same things, in the same physical form as in this world, will be found there. If one were to reflect even a little on the Quran, the matter would become clear. The Quran itself explains what it means when it speaks of that paradise. مَثَلُ الْجَنَّةِ الَّتِي وُعِدَ الْمُتَّقُونَ, the example of the paradise promised to the righteous. And then it says, تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ أُكُلُهَا دَائِمٌ وَظِلُّهَا. This is a symbolic description, a parable through which the idea is conveyed. Elsewhere, the Quran again says, مَثَلُ الْجَنَّةِ الَّتِي وُعِدَ الْمُتَّقُونَ فِيهَا أَنْهَارٌ مِّن مَاءٍ غَيْرِ آسِنٍ وَأَنْهَارٌ مِّن لَبَنٍ لَمْ يَتَغَيَّرْ طَعْمُهُ وَأَنْهَارٌ مِّن لِلشَّارِبِينَ. Meaning that all these things mentioned are examples, introduced by the phrase, its example is like. And above all, the Quran states most clearly, فَلَا تَعْلَمُ نَفْسٌ مَا أُخْفِيَ لَهُم مِّن قُرَّةِ أَعْيُنٍ. No person can know, at the present level of consciousness, what delights of the eyes have been hidden for them. This is absolutely explicit. If all these items mentioned were to be taken in their literal, physical, concrete form, as if the same worldly objects will be found in the hereafter, then they would be nothing more than our everyday things. Or else, the Quran tells us plainly, we cannot know them. And why can we not know them? Metaphysical realities can only be explained through the language of examples. The Quran says that no soul, no human being can know what delights of the eyes we have kept hidden for them. And what are these delights? The Quran says, Jaza'an bima kanu yamalun. They are nothing but the results of their own deeds. These are the comforts of the eyes, but at the present level of human consciousness, no one can comprehend what they truly are. And this is exactly the point, my dear friends. The life of the afterlife belongs to those matters which are called metaphysical, ma'bad al-tabi'at, abstract truths. Such realities can only be explained through examples, because in their actual nature, they cannot be understood at all. We cannot even fully understand the nature of this life. How then could we understand the conditions and realities of the next life? The Quran was revealed in human language, therefore these realities could only be conveyed through similes, metaphors, and symbolic expressions. Even in this world, regarding matters of spiritual experience, eloquent poets confess their inability to express truth directly. Harchand homashara de hak ki guftagu, bantina hi he bada was sagar kahe bager, Mirza Ghalib. If even worldly spiritual experiences cannot be expressed without metaphor, then how could the life of the afterlife, about which the Quran says no one can know what delights have been hidden, be described except through symbolic language? Thus, regarding the paradise of this world, the Quran mentions worldly objects because they belong to this world and appear in familiar forms or in forms similar to the needs of each age. But as for the afterlife, its paradise, its hell, its reward, its punishment, their nature and qualities cannot be described in physical terms. They can only be conveyed through metaphors. Ignoring this principle has led to meaningless objections, and the fault is not entirely theirs. Look at our ancient commentaries. They describe the length and width of the pond of Kawathar. They measure the size of cups and vessels in paradise. They claim that a crow could fly around a single grape of paradise for 500 years without completing the circle. And beyond this, there are descriptions so inappropriate that they cannot be mentioned in respectable gatherings, let alone in the presence of our daughters and sisters. These objections arise from such interpretations. If people had remained within the Quran itself, any objection could be answered simply by presenting two verses. Mathalil jannati lati, this is the example of paradise. The matter would become clear. The Quran uses similes to explain these realities, but because of these very similes, and due to our own misunderstanding, we began to measure them literally. What was meant as metaphor, we turned into physical objects. These are the examples the Quran gave, and they were meant to remain examples, not concrete descriptions.
The Quran's use of parables and the response of different minds. In the next verse, the Quran says, Inna Allaha la yastahi an yabliba mathalan ma ba'udatan fama fawqaha. Indeed, God is not ashamed to set forth an example, even of a mosquito or something even smaller. Up to this point, we had been discussing the symbolic examples of the objects of paradise, refined, delicate, subtle examples. But when it comes to explaining a non-material, imperceptible reality, if necessary, God does not consider it beneath His majesty to use even the example of a tiny mosquito. The point is to give an example. Even if the example is of something smaller, an example is still an example. Therefore, to object by saying, how can a being as exalted as God mention cups, rivers, sunlight, golden bracelets? This objection was raised by people of that era, and today's Orientalists repeat the same thing. For 1,000 years, we too understood these things in the same literal way. But the Quran says, there is nothing shameful in this. Do not hesitate, present it boldly. The Quran expresses these truths in the form of parables, and God Himself has done so. And observe how 1400 years ago, the Quran itself anticipated this reaction and explained it. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فَيَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ. As for those who believe, they know that this is the truth from their Lord.
Those who believe in the fundamental realities understand that what is being conveyed is al-haq, the truth, a permanent reality expressed through sensory metaphors. For them, the matter becomes clear and transparent. But وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَيَقُولُونَ مَاذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِهَذَا مَثَلًا. As for those who deny, they say, what does God mean by this example? The real issue lies in accepting or rejecting fundamental truths. When these truths are rejected, the rejectors develop a mindset that finds fault in everything. They will object to every point. They will see flaws everywhere. Their condition becomes like that of a fly, scanning from head to toe, and wherever they find even a speck of impurity, they settle there. Their gaze is trained only to pick out weaknesses and defects. Why? Because they have already rejected the fundamental truths, and once that happens, their entire angle of vision becomes distorted. As the poet says, "Qimati har shay za andazi negah." The value of everything depends on the angle of one's gaze. When fundamental truths are rejected, the human mind becomes corroded. The Quran says that those who reject these fundamental truths will develop such a mentality that leaving everything else aside, they will even object to the examples themselves. They will say, what kind of examples are these? Rivers of honey flowing? What sort of illustration is that? The Quran responds, يُدِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. It is one and the same thing, yet many go astray through it, and many are guided through it. The difference lies entirely in the angle of vision. As the Punjabi saying goes, "Jis saas di nu nal nahi bandi, o andi e shikayat landi hai, bhai e dekhna ki liandi hegi hai, aata gandi da sir hilda hega." A mother-in-law who dislikes her daughter-in-law will complain even before seeing what she brings. She will assume the flour is already spoiled. A change in perspective changes the very nature of things. This is what the Quran calls Iman. Iman corrects the angle of human vision. When the angle is correct, everything appears in its true form. The false appears false, the true appears true. Thus, when metaphors and symbols appear, a person with the right perspective understands that wine and goblet are metaphors to explain a point, not literal alcohol. But when the angle of vision is distorted, such a person will find faults everywhere. Even if clear truths are presented, he will still see flaws. How true the Quran statement is. يُدِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. What a profound point. The phrase bihi shows that the same thing becomes a source of guidance for some and misguidance for others, depending on their inner state. The Quran emphasizes that the primary requirement is to correct one's angle of vision. Only then can reality be seen as reality. Otherwise, even the truth becomes a cause of deviation. This brings us back to the earlier point. يُدِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Here, the action is attributed to God, just like خَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ. As we explained earlier, this is how the divine law operates. When a person's angle of vision becomes distorted, he begins to draw conclusions according to that distorted perspective. Human psychology is such that the lens through which one views something determines the impression one receives. Is misguided vision created by God or by human choice? Now the question arises, those in whom this distorted way of seeing has developed, is this wrong perception created by God? Did he change the angle of their vision so that one person sees things this way and another sees them that way? Those who believe in the doctrine of predestination, Jabr, and unfortunately in our tradition this idea has been carried forward for centuries, will immediately say, yes, of course, these things are all from God. But when they are asked, then how can reward and punishment be justified? Their answer is simply, he is all-powerful. However, for those who understand the Quran and reflect upon it, the matter becomes clear when the next words appear. The Quran says, do not think that it is God who misguides them. وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ الَّذِينَ يَنْقُضُونَ 2:26-27. He does not misguide through it except the fasiqeen, those who break their covenant. It is the fasiq who goes astray. This is the first time the word fasiq appears in the Quran. In Arabic, even apparent synonyms carry subtle shades of meaning. In our society, words like fisq and fujur are just terms we repeat without thought. We use the word gunah, sin, for everything. But remember, in the Arabic language, there are no true equivalents, what we call synonyms. Two words with exactly the same meaning would be considered a defect in a language. Arabic does not have this defect. In poetry, of course, synonyms are needed. If one word breaks the meter, another with the same meaning can replace it. For example, shad and angabin both mean honey. But Arabic is a vast and comprehensive language. Even when two words appear synonymous, there is always a difference in shade, nuance, or depth. Therefore, when Quranic terms appear, translating all of them simply as sin does not convey the intended meaning. What is fisk? Listen carefully. Take a fruit, for example, a mango. It has a cover, a peel, within which the fruit grows and develops. As long as the peel remains intact and the fruit stays within it, the fruit ripens properly. But sometimes you may have seen a fruit on the tree that is still unripe, yet it bursts through its peel and protrudes out. You know that such a fruit rots. It cannot develop any further. In Arabic, when a fruit breaks out of its peel and becomes exposed prematurely, this condition is called fisk. Even though the fruit is still attached to the tree, still receiving nourishment, still absorbing sunlight, it cannot ripen once it has torn out of its natural protective pattern. What happened? It left the pattern ghalib, within which its growth was meant to occur. This pattern is what you call the Islamic system. The peel may seem insignificant. When we eat a mango, we throw it away. But in the process of growth, that peel is essential. If the fruit tears it and comes out prematurely, it will never ripen. Its potential will never reach completion. That peel, which seems so trivial, is actually vital for the fruit's development. The Islamic system provides the pattern within which humanity develops, not autocracy. This system, this pattern, these social disciplines are absolutely essential for human development. The Quran says that the fasik is the one who does not remain within this pattern, ghalib. He devises an alternative path for himself. You notice that the word yudilu appears alongside fasik. A fasik is precisely the one who abandons the prescribed pattern and chooses a different route for himself. These are the people the Quran is referring to. Those who remain within this pattern understand why the Quran says what it says, but the one who abandons this pattern finds these very teachings laughable or ridiculous. Who are these fasikin? Here the Quran uses only one word, but in many other places you will find the term fasik used with different shades of meaning. And even here, the very first time the Quran introduces this word, it immediately explains who they are. الَّذِينَ يَنْكُدُونَ أَحْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مِيثَاقِهِ وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَنْ يُوصَلَ وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Look at how detailed the explanation is. The first point is this. Through these examples and metaphors, the Quran makes it clear that the fasik is the one who creates mischief, spreads discord, misleads others, and diverts them from the right path. When Quranic parables are not understood as parables, mischief arises. A thought comes to mind here, and I will mention it briefly. The Quran, later in Surah Al-Imran, explains that within the Quranic revelation there are two kinds of verses. هُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابِ مِنْهُ آيَاتٌ مُحْكَمَاتٌ هُنَّ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. These are the firm foundational verses, laws, principles, values, given in a clear, solid, definite manner. وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَاتٌ. And those matters that relate to abstract realities are expressed in the form of parables and metaphors. This is the same point that appeared earlier. Then the Quran says, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ ابْتِغَاءَ الْفِتْنَةِ وَابْتِغَاءَ تَعْوِيلِهِ. Those whose hearts are filled with perversity, who seek only to create mischief, cling to the metaphorical parts, treating them as literal realities. Their aim is to stir confusion, to provoke disorder. Their condition is such that when the Quran gives an example, say of rivers of honey, they immediately take it literally. Yes, real rivers of honey will flow there, and then they begin raising objections. But the Quran's point was, understand a parable as a parable, understand a metaphor as a metaphor, then reflect on the reality being pointed toward, what meaning is being conveyed through this symbolic expression. If one does this, the matter becomes clear. But if the metaphor itself is taken as the actual reality, then mischief arises. My dear friends, look at literature. Most of the confusion and controversy arises because the symbol used to explain something is mistaken for the reality itself. Who knows, perhaps the first poet used the word saki, cupbearer, merely to express the intoxication of spiritual experience. But what followed was that people took it literally. The sake, the goblets, the gathering, the wine, the intoxication, the stumbling, the lifting, everything became a literal scene of drinking. This is a long and detailed discussion on how literature should be understood. The condition of 1,000 years of Islamic literature and our present misery. The Quran states that those who wish to spread mischief do not take these descriptions as parables. Instead, they treat them as literal realities. And if you examine our Islamic literature over the past 1,000 years, you will see that most of the debates revolve around exactly this mistake. For example, when God says, "I created with my own hands," entire volumes have been written discussing whether God's hand has 5 fingers or more. When the Quran says that God is on the throne, scholars have debated the measurements of the throne, the manner of sitting, and similar literal details. What happened here? A metaphor meant to explain a point was taken as a concrete reality, and then people pursued its literal interpretation. وَابْتِغَاءَ تَأْوِيلِهِ, seeking its literal explanation. And you cannot imagine how many sectarian conflicts in this ummah have arisen from this very mistake, the Jabariyah, the Mujassima, and countless others. The point, my dear brothers, is simple. Abstract truths can only be explained through metaphors. A metaphor must be understood as a metaphor. Now it depends on a person's intellect and reflection, how much meaning he can extract from a metaphor about the underlying reality. The more deeply one reflects, the clearer the relationship between the symbol and the reality symbolized becomes. This is what the Quran calls deep reflection. But the fasiqeen do not do this. Who are they? Not only are they the ones who take metaphors literally, but their angle of vision is already distorted. The Quran describes them, الَّذِينَ يَنْقُضُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مِيثَاقِهِ, those who break the covenant of God after having pledged it. As I explained earlier, they are like a fruit still attached to the tree. They have not detached themselves completely, yet they tear through the protective pattern meant for their growth. There is a divine covenant, and they are the ones who first pledge it and then break it in practice. The meaning of the divine covenant and the description of those who break it. The expression mithaq-e khudavandi, the divine covenant, appears in 2 other places in the Quran as well. الَّذِينَ يُوفُونَ بِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ وَلَا يَنْقُضُونَ الْمِيثَاقَ 13:20, and the next verse says, وَالَّذِينَ يَصِلُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَنْ يُوصَلَ 13:21. These are the qualities of the believers, those who fulfill the covenant they have made with God and carry it through to the end. In contrast, the fasiq are described as الَّذِينَ يَنْقُضُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مِيثَاقِهِ وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَنْ يُوصَلَ وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ 2:27. Notice that the very same words appear here as well. For the moment, I am focusing only on the part about breaking the divine covenant. The next part, those who cut what God has commanded to be joined, I will take up later. The Quran says they break the divine covenant. But what is this covenant? Once we understand that, we will understand who the breakers of this covenant truly are. In our mystical and dreamy religious culture, you already know what is commonly believed. I mentioned this in an earlier lecture. They refer to the Yawm ul-Alast, the Day of the Covenant, where God supposedly asked, Alastu bi rabbikum? Qalu bala, 7172. Am I not your Lord? They replied, yes. They claim that this was the covenant, a covenant we do not even remember making. That matter, they say, was settled long ago. But the Quran speaks of a different covenant. Today, to become a Muslim, it is considered sufficient that someone recites the kalima. Earlier, 6 kalimas were taught. Now even that has been reduced. 1 is considered enough. Then a person repeats, Amantu billahi malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusulihi. And after that, he is regarded as a Muslim. The nature and importance of the covenant made with God. My dear brothers, to be a mu'min, true believer, there is a contract that is made with God, a covenant that is bound, a pact upon which one metaphorically places one's signature. And a contract is never one-sided. It always involves 2 parties. Do you know who the other party is in this contract? It is God himself. Just think about it. A contract in which on one side stands a human being signing his name, and on the other side stands God, signing in response. What is this contract? إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَمْوَالَهُمْ بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ. Indeed, God has purchased from the believers their lives and their wealth in exchange for paradise. Here, everything is specified. The buyer is God, the seller is the believer, the commodity is identified, and the price is declared. A proper contract must specify all its elements. God is the purchaser, the believer is the seller. And what does the believer bring to sell? Think about it. What is the most precious commodity a human being possesses? His wealth? Yes, but even more precious than that, his life.
The practical proof of the divine covenant in the Battle of Badr and its true nature. You know that our discussion was moving from the point that ownership in the universe belongs to none but God. The Quran had already explained that the sources and channels of sustenance cannot belong to any nation or individual. To claim ownership over them is to associate partners with God. These were the external, material things. But there are two things which a person naturally considers his own. One, whatever he earns through his labor, his wealth, and above all, his life. These two things might appear to belong exclusively to a human being. The Quran says, fine, they are yours. But if you wish to become a true believer, then according to this covenant, you must sell both of them. One might ask, what price will you get for them? God replies, Dil Jannah, paradise in this world and paradise after death. I will speak about the in-between aspect later, but first, the Quran makes something absolutely clear. Do not think that this is like placing a thumbprint on a simple piece of paper, with God promising paradise and perhaps later going back on his word. These two things, life and wealth, are concrete, real, tangible. They must be given immediately. And sometimes, as in the Battle of Badr, those who gave their lives did not yet receive the paradise of this world, because the system of paradise was still in the process of being established. Those who passed away during that formative period, they still had to give everything, their wealth, their lives, yet they did not live long enough to enjoy the worldly paradise. So the Quran reassures, وَمَنْ أَوْفَى بِعَهْدِهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ. Who is more faithful to his promise than God? Walk forward with this certainty. I said earlier that this transaction has taken place, and regarding this transaction, God himself says something remarkable. Usually the buyer is the one who feels pleased, thinking he has gained something. But here God says, فَاسْتَبْشِرُوا بِبَيْعِكُمُ الَّذِي بَايَعْتُمْ بِهِ. So rejoice, O sellers, in the bargain you have made. Rejoice, celebrate what you have sold and what you have received in return. فَاسْتَبْشِرُوا. Give them glad tidings, congratulate them. As the Punjabi saying goes, or lutli andaye, tute e kuch. You have made a profit beyond imagination. You have gained everything. But how can we understand this congratulations, my dear brothers? We have neither sold the commodity nor received its price. We do not even understand what these prices mean. Maulana Nuruddin Abdur Rahman Jami narrates the story of Yusuf and Zuleika. The moment arrives when the beloved, whom Zuleika had longed for all her life, appears in the marketplace, being sold. Before quoting Jami, why not recall the beautiful lines of our own Maulana Ghulam Rasul? At that very scene, he paints the picture with such tenderness. Jisnu yar vikinda labbe, te qimat hove belle. Uste jaid na talekwe, uste bhag savalle. Blessed is the one who finds the beloved being sold and has the price in hand. No one is more fortunate than such a person. His destiny is truly radiant. Who else but God could offer such a bargain, a perfect paradise in exchange for a few coins, and even those given by him? My dear friends, here this Yusuf, meaning paradise itself, is being sold, and the seller, God, exalted is he above all comparisons, is not deceiving anyone, not cheating, not mixing impurities, not selling smuggled goods. Whatever he promises, he will certainly give. He says the price is already with you, your life is with you. As for wealth, he has not even specified an amount. Whatever you have, little or much, he has not said, I will take this much. Both things are already in your possession. The beloved is available for purchase, and the one who still does not buy, what can be said of such misfortune? Zuleika in the story buys Yusuf. When the women ask her, what did you give? What did you buy? Maulana Nuruddin Abdur Rahman Jami answers in a single line, Diraham chandadam ja kharidam, ta'alala che arza kharidam. I gave a few coins of metal and I bought a life. By God, how cheap a bargain I have made. And our own Ghazal poet expresses it differently. E kimi persi chira jame bijane me kharid. O you who ask why I bought this cup at the price of a life. He replies, In sawal azan saki persche arzon kardast. Ask this question of the saki, why did he sell it so cheaply? Here the seller is God, selling paradise, and what is he taking in return? Whatever you have. As for life, he says, your life was already given by him, yani a pale adata kuchne, meaning you had nothing of your own to give in the first place. As for wealth, he says, qul il affa, first fulfill your own needs, then bring whatever remains. And if someone says, but nothing remains with us, God replies, no matter, still rejoice. فَأَسْتَبْشِرُوا بِبَيْئِكُمُ الَّذِي بَايَعْتُمْ بِهِ وَذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. Rejoice in the bargain you have made, for this is the supreme triumph. Ta'alala che arza kharidam, or in our Punjabi idiom, Oy kya sasta sauda mare addasi. What an unbelievably cheap deal you've struck. This is the divine covenant. Inna Allah ashtara minal mu'minina anfusahum wa ambalahum bi anna lahumul jannah. Indeed, God has purchased from the believers their lives and their wealth in exchange for paradise.
Our way of fulfilling the covenant with God. Then the Quran explains what people actually do after claiming to make this covenant. We also sell, or so we say. Yes, we have signed the covenant. Yes, we have sold our life. Yes, we have sold our wealth. But the real question is, the buyer never seems to come to collect it. So the wealth remains with us, and we enjoy it. The life remains with us, and we enjoy that too. Yet we insist that the covenant is firm, and that we will go and collect paradise later. If God asks, why did you not give what you sold? We reply, you never came to take it. You must have seen signs outside large houses saying, this is a temporary trust in our possession. In reality, the true owner of everything is God. Yet the same trust is rented out, then sold, then passed on to children after death. God is the owner, we say, but we conduct our transactions as if we are the owners. Everything remains exactly where it was. Dari chashme mast ke samne, main naab yu hi bhari rahi. Na kisi ne li, na kisi ne di, jo bhari thi kham mein bhari rahi. Before your intoxicating eyes, the pure wine remained lying there. No one took it, no one gave it. It stayed in the cask as it was. This is how our paradise remains stored in our cask. Jannat muft achmar ke le janea. We'll grab paradise for free and walk away with it. No, my brother, the buyer is not so naive. He has not left the matter hanging. يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَيَقْتُلُونَ وَيُقْتَلُونَ. They fight in the way of God. They kill and are killed. This is how the truth of the covenant is proven. When the cry comes to help oppressed human beings, bring your life and your wealth. Wealth is the lesser thing. People give everything. And then, with their shrouds on their shoulders and their lives in their palms, they step into the battlefield. Then one of two things happens. Either they return victorious and honored, or they give their lives right there. And these are the ones about whom God said, do not think that those whose bodies lie covered in dust and blood are dead. They are alive. Truly alive, even in your present life. There is no doubt about it. Thus the covenant is fulfilled. يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَيَقْتُلُونَ وَيُقْتَلُونَ.
A necessary clarification about the divine covenant. At this point, a question naturally arises. It seems as though this covenant, mithaq, refers only to the believers of the Prophet Muhammad's time, or perhaps to those who came immediately after them, because this is the first place where the covenant is mentioned, and here it says that they break the divine covenant. So is this covenant specific to the Ummah of Muhammad? Is it only for the community that stood before the Messenger Sallallahu, or for those who came after? The Quran says, no, this is not a new covenant. This covenant has existed from the very beginning. My dear friends, observe the subtle beauty of the Quran. Even though, outwardly, there was no need to mention it here, the Quran still clarifies that this is not something newly introduced to you. This is the same covenant that has been continuing throughout history. وَعْدًا عَلَيْهِ حَقًّا فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ. A true promise binding upon him in the Torah and the Gospel. These covenants were made with previous nations as well. This is not a new concept that has been introduced now. Of course, the Torah and Gospel referred to here are the revelations sent to the prophets, not the altered books that exist today under those names.
those have been distorted, but the original revelations contained the same covenant. Thus, the divine covenant stands clearly before us. And who are the fasiqeen? The Quran says, الَّذِينَ يَنْقُضُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مِيثَاقِهِ. They are those who break the covenant of God after having pledged it. The station of a true believer is impossible without this covenant. My dear friends, you have now seen the definition of a moment, and you have seen the nature of his covenant. Now we must look at ourselves. You may say, we never signed such a covenant, not explicitly, not formally, but the Quran says, Inna Allaha. Notice the emphasis on inna, meaning, if you want to know who a true believer is, then certainly he is the one who enters into this covenant. You may respond like innocent children. Na niti, na kazakiti, na ehed nama ekita, na asi onutoria. We neither intended nor committed anything. We never made such a covenant, so how could we break it? Fine. If you did not make the covenant, then assign yourself to some other category, but do not call yourself a moment. And if you say, well, even if we are like employees, we have made the covenant, then after يَنْقُدُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مِيثَاقِهِ, you must also accept your place among the fasiqeen. That is one aspect, that they break the covenant. The second is, وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَنْ يُوصَلَ. They cut apart what God has commanded to be joined. They tear apart what God ordered to be connected. They divide what God commanded to remain united. God has given certain things and commanded that they be joined together, and this is the very foundation of Deen, my dear friends. What is that thing which God commanded to be joined? The fundamental principle of Deen is the establishment of God's system as a universal code of life for humanity. The foundational point of Deen is the unity of the Creator and the unity of humanity. Belief in one God practically means one universal code of law for all human beings, and when humanity itself becomes one community, one brotherhood, then a single code of law can truly function. All human beings are members of one family, branches of the same tree, and over them applies one and the same law. My dear friends, on a tree there is only one law operating. It never happens that the branch on the right side is governed by one law, the branch on the left by another, the leaves by a different law, and the fruit by yet another. From the root to the final bud, the entire tree is governed by one unified system. The success of the entire universe lies in its unity. Unity is such a fundamental principle that even if we set revelation aside, modern science itself rests on two basic laws, the very pillars of scientific thought. One, the law of cause and effect, which the Quran calls kanune mukafat, every action produces a result. And two, the law of the uniformity of nature, the principle that nature behaves consistently everywhere. This second law means if you perform a certain action under certain conditions, a specific result will follow, and it will always follow. Wherever those same conditions exist, the same result will occur. Even when you go to the moon, the instruments attached to spacecraft function exactly according to the same laws as the control systems operating here on Earth. The entire universe operates under one unified system. As the poet says, Lahu korshid katepke agar zareka dil chir. If you split the heart of a particle, the blood of the sun will drip from it. The nature of human divisions against the intent of revelation and their cure. My dear brothers, leave everything else aside. The Quran says about human beings, وَمَا كَانَ النَّاسُ إِلَّا أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. Mankind was nothing but one single community. All of humanity is one ummah, one brotherhood, ummatan wahida, one united human family. But then, فَاخْتَلَفُوا, they created divisions among themselves. The divine intent was unity of humanity, but people created differences. Differences of families, differences of tribes, differences of nations, differences of races, differences of color, differences of languages, differences of religions. And going even further, divisions within the followers of the same religion, sects and subsects, which the Quran declares to be a form of shirk. This is the meaning of وَيَقْتَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَنْ يُوصَلَ. They cut apart what God commanded to be joined. God commanded unity. They tore it into pieces. The divine program for removing human divisions. Human beings created divisions, so God established a program to remove them. Kana nasu ummatan wahida. Mankind was originally one community. Then, fakhtalafu, they created divisions. So what did God do to eliminate these divisions? فبعث الله النبيين مبشرين ومنذرين وأنزل معهم الكتاب بالحق ليحكم بين الناس فيما اختلفوا فيه. God sent prophets as bearers of good news and warnings, and sent with them the book in truth, so that it may judge between people in matters of their differences. People created divisions and shattered unity. God sent prophets to restore unity. How? By giving them a book, a code of law, and commanding, لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِيمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, decide all matters of dispute according to this book. Unity would be restored. This is the divine program for unity. A prophet is sent with a book, and the book is given so that whenever differences arise, people refer to it, take its verdict, and unity is reestablished. How we sabotaged God's program of unity. My dear brothers, leave others aside. Look at what we have done to this divine program. God sent a prophet, the seal of the prophets, the greatest of all prophets. A book, complete, perfect, preserved until the day of judgment. A book about which it is said, "Having written you, the author placed his pen aside. Nothing more remained to be written." Such a book. This book was given to us to eliminate differences, to unite us, to provide a single standard for resolving disputes. It was the final, complete form of divine guidance, so that divisions would end. And yet, look at what we have done with it. Our conduct, despite the clear teachings of the Quran, and the result. We possess the Quran, we profess faith in the Prophet ﷺ, and yet you have seen the condition of our internal divisions. For a long time one could still hope that someday this ummah would realize that such division is against the will of God, against his intention, and against the explicit commands of the Quran. The Quran has declared sectarianism within Deen to be shirk. One hoped that eventually this nation would understand this. But today, in our own era, these things are being stated as accepted truths. These sects have already formed. Now they cannot be undone. Proceed with the assumption that sects will remain. Now tell us, how can Islam move forward? What a statement! It is like saying, the idols placed in the Kaaba, they are there now, they cannot be removed. Now tell us how God's house can still remain God's house while the idols stay inside. Very well then, we will commit shirk, because that is what is happening. Now tell us how while committing shirk we can still be monotheists. Someone needs to tell them what the cure is for this kind of self-deception. My dear friends, reflect on the program God gave for eliminating differences, the final form in which he gave it to us, and what we have done with it. Regarding the unity of humanity, the Quran said, God is Rabbul Alameen, Lord of all worlds. His messenger is Rahmatan lil Alameen, a mercy for all worlds. His book is Dhikrun lil Alameen, a reminder for all worlds. A book meant to eliminate the differences of the entire human race. And yet, in practice, the very nation that believes in this book is fragmented into countless sects, torn apart by endless divisions. How true are the words of God? وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَنْ يُوصَلَ. They cut apart what God commanded to be joined. Now you can see clearly who they are, those who claim association with the Quran, yet through this very Quran they wander onto false paths. And you understand what the same Quran means in this context. The Quranic meaning of fasad, drawing lines of division among human beings. The third point mentioned is, وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ 2:27. They spread corruption in the land. This has appeared earlier as well. I had explained that in our common usage, fasad means fighting, quarreling, riots. When we say there was fasad, we mean there was chaos or violence. But according to the Quran, fasad does not mean this. In Arabic, the word stands opposite to islah. Islah means to create harmony, smoothness, balance. Fasad means to create unevenness, imbalance, disharmony. So, وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ 2:27 means they create inequalities and distortions in the land. The first form of this facade is creating divisions, drawing geographical lines, people on one side of a mountain versus the other, people on one side of a river versus the other, nations divided by borders, communities separated by artificial boundaries. And this entire world, which is turning into a kind of hell, is doing so because of these lines drawn by human beings. These are the very things God commanded to eliminate, but they cut them apart. Then, within these boundary lines, another form of facade emerges. وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ, meaning internal class divisions, social stratification, economic inequality. Look at the miracle of the Quran. First, it mentions the divisions between groups, and then it describes the false systems within each group, systems that generate inequality, classes, and hierarchies. And my dear friends, if the divine covenant, mithaq, were upheld, none of these things could ever arise. All of this happens because an individual claims private ownership, then a tribe claims ownership, then a nation claims ownership, and they refuse to share with others. The Quranic economic system does not allow class divisions to emerge among humanity. The Quranic system is meant for all of humanity. This al-ard, the earth, is for all people, lil-nas. The system is designed to meet the needs of the entire human race. Whatever a person earns through effort and labor, his share in it is only according to his needs. Whatever remains beyond his needs is meant for others, for those who cannot earn as much, who cannot work as much. And this entire code of life is meant to apply to all humanity. Ask whether paradise al-Jannah is attained or not, but the fasiqeen cannot enter paradise. These are the fasiqeen. They take small, trivial matters, turn them into objections, twist them into arguments, and then all the distortions begin, exactly as we see in our society. Life, Jan, was the greatest thing, the very thing God said must be given. Whatever wealth you earn it only while life exists. If life is gone, the question of earning wealth does not even arise. After saying this much, the very next verse asks, "Tell me, how can you deny that this is the correct way of life?" Life was the greatest thing, and God says, "Kaifa takfuruna billahi wa kuntum amatan," 2:28. How can you deny God when you were dead and He gave you life? You did not become alive on your own. You were among the dead.
The early stages of human existence. The state before this life is described here as absence of life. Death simply means when life is not present. The discussion could go far, but scientifically, this is a profound point. There is a stage the Quran describes. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Has there not come upon man a period of time when he was not even a thing mentioned? There was a time when man was not even worth mentioning. After that, he came into mention, but still had not taken human form. This was that inanimate stage where there was no life yet. The Quran says, you had no life. Who placed life within you? فَأَحْيَاكُمْ, He gave you life. So even from this angle, the life you call my life, my existence, is not really yours. And look at God's generosity. He gave you life, and then He buys it back from you, giving you a price for what was originally His. كَيْفَ تَكْفُرُونَ, how can you deny such a Lord? Or in Punjabi, O ehude rab kolo inkar karande areo? Are you really denying a Lord like this? Iqbal said it beautifully. Jan eke bakhshan digar nagirand, Adam bemirad as beyaqini. He who gives never takes back. Man dies only from lack of certainty. Zabur Ajam, 1948, page 164. Human life is not something God gives only to take back. And God does not take it back. This itself is astonishing. The life He gave you was not given so that He might later snatch it away. A human being dies due to his own uncertainty, his own inner collapse. God does not take back the life He granted. And listen, my dear friends, to a subtle point. The stage of فَأَحْيَاكُمْ, He gave you life, is followed naturally by ثُمَّ يُمِيتُكُمْ, then He causes you to die. If God had taken back the life He gave,
then there would be no question of thumma yumitukum. It would simply be, this life was mine. I gave it, and now I take it back. But no. When life ends, it ends according to his law, and you can do nothing about it. But what God wants is something else. At that moment when you are helpless and forced to surrender your life, he wants you to give it willingly, by your own choice, and then he will return it to you, not keep it. This is the meaning of thumma yumitukum. Then he will bring you to life again. That is all. Liyablu'akum ayyukum ahsanu amala. Through life and death, you are given the opportunity to show, what kind of heart do you possess? We do not keep your life. We only test what you choose to do with it. A life sold to God never experiences death. Reflect on your helplessness. Kuntum amwatan. You were dead. Could you have brought yourselves to life? Never. Fa'ahyakum. He gave you life. Then again, your helplessness. When death approaches, you try everything in the world to stop it, but you cannot. And then comes God's generosity. Thumma yuhyikum. Then he will give you life again. And about those who give their lives under the covenant, God says, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا. Do not think that those who are killed in the path of God are dead. Those who surrender their lives willingly under the divine contract do not pass through the intermediate stage of yumitukum. The one who dies unwillingly, by compulsion, truly dies. But the one who says, I have sold this life, for him that intermediate phase of death does not exist. What a profound truth. The Sufi created confusion about life and death, the idea that the human soul is a part of the Paramatma. My dear friends, another issue arises here. People assume that we may live however we wish, and somehow we remain outside God's grasp. But the Quran says, ثُمَّ إِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. Then to him you will be returned. This phrase requires explanation. The word thumma has created a slight misunderstanding in minds, not because the Quran is unclear, but because we have misunderstood it. And then a mistaken Sufi concept entered our tradition and stamped its seal of confirmation on this misunderstanding. People began to interpret the verse as if it means, we came from God, we descended into this world, and after death we will go back to God. But God himself says, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَ مَا كُنْتُمْ. He is with you wherever you are. If he is with us right now, then what does it mean to go to him after death? How can you return to one who never left you and from whom you were never separated? The confusion was strengthened by a false mystical doctrine borrowed from Vedanta in Hindu philosophy. According to that idea, the human soul is Atma, God's soul is Paramatma. The human soul is a fragment of the divine soul. It became separated from its original source. It fell into the mire of matter. Now it weeps in this world, trapped in the mud of material existence. And the only way to free it is to wash away the mud through austerities, renunciation, and withdrawal from the world. The purpose of all this hardship is to reunite the separated soul with its original divine essence. This is the story they tell. As if we voluntarily separated from God, or as if God shivered once and sparks flew out, and we fell like scattered embers into the dust of this world. And now we are told, Bito ette to bacho garosaf. A life full of hardship, asceticism, and self-inflicted suffering, all so that the soul may somehow return and merge back into its original divine essence. Mi nasuzat khudai. The Hindu concept of the soul and the origin of Urs in our culture. No, my dear brothers, the entire foundation of this idea is wrong. The question itself is misplaced. This is the misunderstanding created in Sufism regarding Raj'at ila Allah, the notion that souls return to God in the sense of physically going back to Him. Because of this, the death of those saints who are considered spiritually elevated is not called death. They call it wisal, union, as if the soul has finally met God. And this meeting is celebrated like a wedding. You know what an urs is. The word urs itself means marriage. Arus means bride. So every year, the saint's death anniversary is celebrated as a marriage anniversary. Do you know where this idea of God's brides came from? In Christianity, the nuns are literally called brides of God. And in Delhi, though not so much in Lahore, you see the Warasiya groups. Saffron robes, long hair like women, bangles on their wrists. They are literally called brides. Look, my dear friends, see how these ideas travel from one culture to another. The Quran says, Inna ilayhi raji'un. But people do not even understand that raji'un is an ismu fa'il, an active participle, meaning one who constantly turns toward him, one whose every step is directed toward him. We use the word rujur correctly in everyday speech, but when it appears in the Quran, suddenly death comes into their minds. Ote patani ki maut pa jandi hai. Where does this phrase actually appear? In وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. We shall certainly test you with fear, hunger, loss of wealth, lives, and fruits. Yes, such moments will come. Great dangers, threats to wealth, threats to life, destruction of crops, every kind of hardship. And then, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Give glad tidings to those who remain steadfast. Who are they? الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ. When hardship strikes them. At such moments, when every trial tests their endurance, they stand firm, unshaken. Their steps continue to move forward. As difficulties intensify, as trials grow harsher, their tongues spontaneously utter, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to God, and every step of ours moves toward Him. These obstacles cannot stop them. What a meaning of raji'un! What a magnificent expression! These are the people of whom God says, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Give them glad tidings. When the hardest trials come, they do not run away, they do not turn their backs, they do not sit down in despair. Their every step advances forward, and from their lips comes this powerful declaration. You think these hardships, these mountains of difficulty will stop us? We do not belong to ourselves. We have dedicated ourselves entirely to the fulfillment of His program. Every step we take will be toward Him. And then God says, عَلَيْهِمْ صَلَوَاتٌ مِّن رَبِّهِمْ. Upon them are blessings and congratulations from their Lord. This, my dear friends, is the true meaning of Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Not death, not mystical union, not merging into God, but constant, unwavering movement toward His mission. How we have turned Inna lillah from a cry of strength into a sigh of despair. And today, in the moment of greatest calamity, when helplessness overwhelms us, we say, very well then, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. How true the Quran was when it said, Yudilil bihi kathira wa yahdi bihi kathira. Through it, many are led astray, and many are guided. That Inna lillahi which once sent lightning through the veins, a surge of resolve, courage, and steadfastness, today reduces you to a heap of ashes. Where the deepest despair exists, there you utter Inna lillahi. Whenever a shocking or painful news reaches you, the phrase slips from your tongue automatically, but without understanding what it means. Yet those who truly say Inna lillahi are the ones upon whom Ula'ika alayhim salawatum min rabbihim. Upon them are blessings from their Lord. As the Punjabi remark goes, Jihoji umma dena enadakwe rabbi hoirega. With a nation like this, only a God like this could still be theirs. The true meaning of ilayhi turja'un, not going back to God after death. My dear brothers, ilayhi turja'un does not mean that God is somewhere far away and that after death we will go back to Him. That is not the meaning. To understand it, consider this example. A fugitive criminal, an ishtihari, a wanted man, runs away. He tries to escape the jurisdiction of the authorities. He tries to cross the border so that he may be outside their reach. The Quran says in a most astonishing manner that with God, such a thing is impossible. There is no border you can cross. There is no jurisdiction you can escape. There is no place where His law does not apply. So ilayhi turja'un means you will always be brought back into his jurisdiction, into the consequences of his law, into the results of your own deeds. It is not about location, it is about accountability. God's law surrounds the human being from all sides, and every step a person takes moves towards him. My dear brothers, you know about those recent remarkable operations carried out under the supervision of our respected SSP. Many notorious criminals and gangsters were eliminated. We once asked him how such things actually happen. He said, "We follow these people for months, but they never fall into our hands. Wherever we are, they run in the opposite direction. Then one day, thinking the area is clear, they themselves turn back and walk right into the place where we are waiting. That is when they are caught." This is the meaning of ilayhi raji'un. It is rarely the case that they are caught by chasing them from behind. They have their own escape routes. What actually happens is that they themselves walk into the net. What an insight the Quran gives. It says, these people commit corruption on earth, tear apart the unity of humanity, and shred the divine covenant. After destroying the unity of mankind, they imagine they are immune. No one can catch us. We are beyond reach. God's rule does not operate here. We have escaped his jurisdiction. But God says, "O foolish one, you yourself are walking into the circle of his grasp. Ilayhi raji'un. Every step you take is moving towards him." This is the law of consequences, the law of mukafat, towards which you are heading. Wallahu muhitun bil kafirin. God has surrounded the deniers from all sides. I believe the best translation of muhitun here is exactly what the police call a cordon, a complete encirclement. We are surrounded from every direction. Therefore, kayfa takfuruna billah? How can you deny God? How can you deny the one whose hold over all your affairs is so firm? After rejecting his laws, do you imagine that no one will question you? That you can establish any system you wish without consequence? This is all an illusion. Every step you take is moving deeper into the grip of his law of requital. That is why he says, kayfa takfuruna billah? On what basis can you deny the laws of God? On one side, he is so generous, giving you immense gifts without ever asking for them back. On the other side, his grasp is so firm. Inna batsha rabbika la shadid. Indeed, the grip of your Lord is severe. These are not the handcuffs from which criminals sometimes slip away. No, batsha rabbika la shadid means a grip from which escape is impossible. And your condition is such that every wrongdoer, even unconsciously, is being drawn step by step into God's cordon. So, kayfa takfuruna billah? How can you deny such a God? The argument returns to its starting point, God's ownership and human responsibility. My dear brothers, the discussion began with, Ya ayyuhan nasu ubudu rabbakumul ladhi khalaqakum walladhina min qablikum. O mankind, serve your Lord who created you and those before you. He created all the means of life for you. He sent down rain from the sky for your benefit. He produced sustenance for you. Then he said, فَلَا تَجْعَالُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. Do not set up partners with God while you know. Do not associate anyone with him in his ownership. This is kufr, this is shirk, this is fasad fil ard. This is what shatters the unity of humanity. The driving force behind all corruption is the concept of private ownership. The discussion began there, and now it concludes here. هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَّا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. He is the one who created for you all that is in the earth, entirely. Again, the letter la appears, meaning for your benefit. Everything on this earth is for all of you, collectively. Then comes the phrase, ثُمَّ اسْتَوَىٰ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. This is often translated as, then he ascended and sat upon the heavens. This translation is completely incorrect. The Quranic meaning of the terms ard and sama, earth and sky. My dear brothers, sama and ard are two fundamental Quranic terms. Literally, they mean heights and depths. Physically, we see one sphere beneath us, the earth, and many spheres above us, the heavens. But do not assume that the Quran refers only to the spheres above. There may also be spheres below the earth. Why then does the Quran not mention the spheres beneath? Because the Quran uses ard and sama in a relative sense, exactly as modern science now understands. A scientist says, these terms are relative. Among three levels, the middle one is below the one above it, above the one below it. Thus, what is sama, sky, for the lower level, becomes ard, earth, for the level above it. Reflect on this. The literal meanings of ard and sama are simply lower and upper. We took ard to mean the earth beneath us, and sama to mean the sky above us. But the Quran uses these terms in their universal, relative sense, not in the narrow, physical sense we impose on them. The Quran's conception of multiple skies and their corresponding earths, a cosmic system of relative levels. This is one of the Quran's great marvels. At one place, it states that for every sama, sky, there is a corresponding ard, earth, meaning every level of existence is a sky in relation to what lies beneath it, and an earth in relation to what lies above it. What an extraordinary insight this book gives, my dear brothers. There is no doubt that the ground on which we live is also called ard. But because every height is sky relative to what is below it, and every depth is earth relative to what is above it, the terms ard and sama refer to the lower and higher realms of the universe. Thus, when ard is mentioned in contrast with sama, then sama refers to the cosmic order, the higher forces and systems of the universe. Ard refers to human social, economic, and civilizational life. And sama, or samawat, does not refer only to celestial bodies. It includes all the energies and forces spread throughout the higher regions of space, ether, atomic forces, and the entire fabric of the cosmos. In other words, the atmosphere along with all its contents. With this understanding, the meaning of thumma istawa ila sama becomes clear. Now that the meanings of ard and sama are clear, consider the verse, thumma istawa ila sama, 2:29. It does not mean that God was dealing with the earth first and then went up to the heavens and sat down there. This is not the meaning at all. The verse first states that everything on the earth, the place where you live, has been furnished with the means of life. But this does not mean that God dug into the earth, filled it with bags of provisions, and then left. No. This entire system functions under a unified cosmic order. If the earth contains the potential for life, then the rest of the universe must also remain under God's control for that system to function. This is the meaning of istawa, central governance, central control, sovereign administration. As in, thumma istawa alal ash, he established his authority upon the throne. The throne is not a wooden or jeweled seat. You know what throne means in human language: sovereignty, government, central command. In Arabic, arsh carries this very meaning. Thus, the verse means, we created the entire system of the universe, and we hold its central control in our hands. The Earth is not an independent unit. It is part of a tightly interconnected cosmic system. Do not imagine that the Earth is an independent unit, functioning on its own, disconnected from the rest of the universe. It is not so. There is an intricate interconnection between all cosmic forces. There is a profound harmony and discipline binding them together. As I said earlier, Lahu khurshid ka tapke agar zarre ka dil chire. Split the heart of a particle, and the blood of the sun will drip from it. This is the unity of the cosmos, a system in which every part is linked to every other part. A single movement of the human finger sends a vibration through the entire universe. James Jeans, one of the greatest astronomers of the modern age, writes in his book The Mysterious Universe about the astonishing relationship between human beings and the vast cosmos. He says, when a person moves even a single finger, he has no idea that, in your words, its vibration reaches all the way to the arsh. A tiny motion of your finger creates a disturbance in the atmosphere, and you cannot imagine how far the imperceptible atomic energies, nuclear radiations, and subtle waves carry that motion, nor what effects it produces in distant regions. Therefore, Sama and Arsh are not isolated spheres with no connection to each other. They are bound together in a profound, interwoven network of relationships. The Arsh represents central control, and further clarification of art and sama. To maintain this universal interconnectedness, a central control is necessary. This is what the Quran expresses through the metaphor of the Arsh. It says, the central control of the entire system is in our hands. Then comes the phrase, فَسَوَّاهُنَّ سَبْعَ سَمَوَاتٍ, 229. The expression سَبْعَ سَمَوَاتٍ has caused much misunderstanding. People translate it as 7 heavens. In Arabic, saba can mean 7, but Arabic has a unique linguistic feature. Certain numbers are used not as literal counts, but as perfect numbers, complete numbers, or figures of emphasis. Just as we say in Urdu, मैं तुम्हें 20 बार समझा चुका हूँ, सैकड़ों दफा कहा है, हजार बार बताया है. We do not mean literal 20s, hundreds, or thousands. We mean many times, countless times. Similarly, in classical Arabic, saba can mean 7, 17, 70, 70,000. And you have heard in sermons phrases like sattar hazar farishte, sattar hazar zanjire. These are not literal numbers. They simply mean a great many, numerous, several. Thus, sab'a samawatin does not mean 7 heavens. It means multiple levels, many realms, several layers of higher existence. These heights and depths, these sama and art, are numerous, not fixed to a specific count. The first point stated here is خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, 229. He created for you all that is in the earth. This ties directly back to the discussion of the system of rububiyyat, divine sustenance. Throughout the passage, the Quran has been emphasizing that whatever God has created belongs only to Him. No one else can claim ownership over it. How then will the unity of humanity be achieved? By understanding the meaning of lakum, for all of you. Elsewhere in Surah Ar-Rahman, He says, وَالْأَرْضَ وَضَعَهَا لِلْأَنَامِ, and the earth, He laid it out for all living beings. The earth has been created for all creatures, for all humanity. Thus, the first pillar of human unity is the unity of sustenance, that the resources of the earth belong to all. But there is another crucial element, the universality of the law of consequences. My dear brothers, there is another point here, and it is extremely important. That is, ثُمَّ إِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ, then to Him you will be returned. This refers to the universality of the law of mukafat, the law of consequences, the law of requital. In this context, the Quran introduces the concepts of ard and sama, and understanding their meaning is essential. This is one of the most profound passages in the Quran. The earth, ard, and the higher realms, sama, are not isolated domains. They are part of a single integrated system governed by the same divine law. Human actions on earth fall under the same universal law that governs the cosmos. Thus, خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ establishes the unity of sustenance. ثُمَّ إِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ establishes the unity of accountability. Together, they form the foundation of a just, unified human order. The awe-inspiring purpose, vastness, and limitlessness of creation, and the limits of human understanding. People often ask, what is the purpose of the creation of this universe? What is the purpose behind it? God certainly has an overall cosmic program, a grand purpose behind the entire universe. But as far as we are concerned, He has explained only the part that relates to us, and that is all we need to know. The larger scheme, the infinite purpose behind the limitless universe, cannot fit into our finite minds. We cannot even conceive of an infinite universe. We cannot imagine infinite time. We must always begin time somewhere and end it somewhere. The infinite cannot be contained within the finite. Therefore, the overall cosmic purpose is beyond our comprehension. But the part that concerns human beings, that He has explained clearly. Listen, what purpose does He Himself give for the creation of the universe? The purpose of the universe is that no human action should remain without consequence. As far as we are concerned, God says, وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ. God created the heavens and the earth with truth. The first point is, This universe is not a dream, not an illusion, not a game. It has been created as a reality, بالحق, a real, purposeful system. When I come to that topic, I will explain how the Quran refutes all false cosmologies simply by saying بالحق. But for now, the next point is crucial. Why was this universe created? وَلِتُجْسَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ, so that every soul may be fully recompensed for what it has earned, and no one shall be wronged. Reflect on this. This vast, astonishing machinery of the cosmos, this mind-boggling system of creation, is operating so that no human action may remain without its result. And remember, the Quran does not limit action to outward visible deeds. Human courts deal only with actions that can be seen or proven. But God says, "We know the betrayals of your eyes and the thefts of your hearts." So the definition of amal, or action, becomes all-encompassing, every intention, every thought, every hidden motive. And the purpose of creation becomes this, that no human action, outward or inward, should remain without consequence. The entire cosmic machinery exists so that no human thought or action remains without consequence. My dear brothers, do you know what all this activity in the universe is doing? The forces we cannot see, the energies we cannot comprehend, the systems whose scope we cannot grasp? All of them are ensuring that not even a single thought that passes through my heart remains without producing a result. This unimaginably vast machinery has been created so that none of your actions remain without consequence. An action includes not only wrong deeds, but also beautiful deeds, noble intentions, and every constructive contribution. What an extraordinary reality that this magnificent workshop of the universe has been brought into existence so that even a good thought that passes through my heart must blossom into a beautiful flower for me. This is the purpose of the creation of the universe. God says, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Whatever is in the heights of the universe and whatever is in its depths belongs to God. Everything in the cosmos, its lower realms and its higher realms, is working under God's appointed laws, within His ownership, under His control, fulfilling His ordained program. The letter li here carries both meanings, belongs to Him and is for His purpose. Both are correct. Then He says, لِيَجْزِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسَاءُوا بِمَا عَمِلُوا وَيَجْزِيَ الَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا بِالْحُسْنَى, so that those who do wrong may receive the result of what they did, and those who do good may receive the best reward. Meaning, whoever commits an imbalance, its result must appear. Whoever contributes beauty to the universe, that too must bear fruit. Nothing is lost. You cannot escape the law of mukafat. Run 1,000 times, you will still return to it. In fact, even now, every step you take is moving toward it. This law has been set by the very God who created you on this earth, provided you with the means of growth, and placed you within a universe where countless celestial bodies perform their duties with perfect balance and precision. All of this happens according to the law of the one about whom the Quran says, وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. He is fully aware of the hidden potentials and inner demands of every single thing. The cosmic system exists to ensure precise results for human actions. My dear brothers, this entire system of Ard and Sama, the lower and higher realms, is functioning so that the exact results of human actions may be produced. To understand this truth, one must first understand the nature of the human being and the place of humanity within the universe. This has been explained in the Quran through the symbolic narrative of Adam, which is in reality the story of the human being himself. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ.